soon as I step off the train in Napoli, I'm like, I don't know if I should be wearing this shirt. I don't know if they're like chill about all this stuff.
You should have changed at least 4 train stops before you hit Napoli.
And it was a huge mistake because as soon as I stepped out of the train station, they were like, why are you wearing that? Like literally random people. And then the cab drivers, who are all Napoli ultras conveniently. And
because everybody is.
Right.
There's nobody there that is not going to be a ride or die.
Right. They had as soon as they saw me with the shirt, they started showing me all their tattoos and pictures of Maradona on their body
and the murals and hanging in the streets.
Yeah, and none of the
soon to be on the inside of your eyelids.
None of the cab drivers wanted to give me a ride. Like 100. I'm not even exaggerating. They were like, "No, we don't. You look what you're wearing." They don't want.
I think, as an experience, especially speaking to Americans, the way that we have rivalries, MLS, NWSL, otherwise, within like nationally domestic leagues, are absolutely nothing compared to what you'll experience. I'll speak specifically to Serie A, which is just, it's phenomenal. But when I say that calcio is religion, I mean it. 100%. People, not that this should be a thing, but like people will die for their club.
Right.
And it is just part of everyday normal life. It's not a joking matter. It's your whole entire day is ruined. Sometimes your entire day is made.
Right.
But they are very, very serious, especially Napoli.
I love it. Nick Rad just said, seriously, how in the world did Christian make it home from Italy?
Honestly, I'm not sure either. I'm thinking he had to have paid someone for passage. Well, like there was somebody low key that accepted money that were like, I feel bad for this poor man.
The guy who ended up the cab driver who ended up giving us a ride was, I mean, like begrudgingly, like, fine, I'll do it. And like, he told me to make sure you burn that shirt. He said,
I'm surprised he didn't make you burn it outside of the taxi.
He said, thank God you weren't wearing a Juve kit.
It's worse.
Yeah, who said that would have been much worse. It was I learned my lesson very quickly. Okay, and
you live to tell the tale, which is more important, right?
Okay, so I'm glad they spared me. But I want to talk about Napoli in just the fact that they've been so dominant this season. They're 15 points above second place, which is Inter, and. Not necessarily how have they done it, but why has it? We're used to seeing Juve have this gap, but obviously, they're
Juve have experienced a number of things on and off field that have impacted their performance.
But what specifically? Maybe the easy answer is just Victor Osimhen. But what is it? Well, how have Napoli been this dominant?
It isn't just Osimhen. He's a phenomenal player. He really is. I love him so much. I keep saying like, I want to interview Osimhen. Like that's officially mentally a goal. But it actually is just that they have this conflation of players that the depth is there, even if it's not a one-to-one replacement. So even as they've experienced injuries and otherwise during this season, they haven't been impacted in the ways that say Inter have or Roma have, or Lazio, Milan especially. Milan didn't quite make the moves they needed to in the transfer window to kind of fortify their bench. And you've seen it, like you're still relying heavily on, Giroud, who by all means has some of the most beautiful aerial goals and perfect hair in the league. But, it's
not enough sometimes,
it's not, right?
It's a shame.
But especially for Milan, like their big hit was like not having Mike Maignan for a chunk of time, and he's such a significant role in that squad. Sometimes it's your keeper, sometimes it's not, but it absolutely is for them. Napoli just managed to do some like ridiculously good scouting. They let go Koulibaly, which I was deeply upset about in the beginning of the season.
Chelsea,
I had already counted them out early, which is kind of comical now in hindsight, because who did they go and they picked up? They pick up Kim Min-jae, who is phenomenal.
Beast.
They pick up Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, who is so good, and I'm so hyped over this man.
Just nailed the name. Love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be learning Georgian any day now. No, but when I say like he is like one of those once in a lifetime players that you see pop up, that the scouting was so good, and Napoli pulling the trigger on him is by far, I'd say in the last year, maybe 2 years, the best scouting move of any side. And that's, including big name players like Vlahovic, that, Chiesa, even outside of Serie A, where, you've had to do battle with some of the Premier League teams. But I never imagined that this Napoli side from jump, and like ADL is a staunch businessman. He's very smart. But with that comes sometimes this bizarre detraction from the emotionality that you expect to see from Napoli, right? Like we are a passionate people, like all in Italians. But when you look at it and you're like, wait, how do you strip the emotion out enough to ask somebody like a Koulibaly if they're willing to take a pay cut in the beginning of the season and then end up offloading them, which he agreed to?
Right.
Who in their right mind that knows they're at the top of their game is like, sure, I'll do that. But that is the magic that is Napoli. So I think that all of that coming together has just created this beautiful, it's art. It's not even just, it's art, it's music, it's theater. Napoli have it this season.
Well, I go to Napoli and then they end up winning Serie A.
I would like to retract my prior statement. Christian Polanco showed up in Napoli and boom, the magic happened.
Del Boys.
Did you meet with ADL? Is that what happened? You said,
he met with Spalletti. He was like, here's what you got to do.
As I'm wearing with my Milan kit. And
right.
Just letting him know.
Showing up to the Maradona.
Luciano,
I have some notes. I got some notes.
Del Boy Zero asked, he meant Cupo. He put Chupo, which is whatever. It's fun.
Perché?
Fun name. It said, can Osimhen hack it in the Premier League? Athletic players stand out more in Italy than highly athletic England. I mean, before you answer, I think this general question of how players can do in the Premier League. I mean, we saw Lukaku had one of the greatest years as a professional in Italy, and then goes back to England, and then it's just a tale. It's just like Jekyll and Hyde. None of it really makes sense. I don't know. Look, the Premier League, just like you mentioned, will just poach players. I mean, we've had these conversations. There's just so much money, and players are not really going to turn down an opportunity to make some of the most money they can in their careers.
It depends on the player for sure, but knowing that as a player, you do not know the length of your career, right? Like it could end tomorrow in just, the fetal position in tears because you've had a career-ending injury. And I will never, ever hold it against any player that's like, I'm securing the bag in this moment.
Right.
Because, like you have a livelihood to, support going forward. You may not have the stability of a career. A lot of them, this has been their entire life from academy as a child, right? You haven't exactly had the time to cultivate another skill or like pick up a college degree.
What do you mean you don't know how to code? We all know how to code.
I learned in my basement, actually. Like my brief stint learning to code was probably like MySpace, and then I gave up. So you don't want to hire me for that.
I do want to push back on just that question because we get this a lot. Like, do you think they can do it in the Premier League? As if that is the defining thing.
Let me just first and foremost, and this is not in any way showing my bias. I think if anything, compared to some of my contemporaries, I'm able to be more objective and strip out some of the emotional aspects of, talking about a league that I grew up as a fan loving. But I think that the Premier League as a benchmark for all of the leagues is just, it's largely silly, right? Because like a standout player is going to stand out irrespective of however things play out. Not to mention, not every league is for every player. And that goes across the board, right? Like, and I love, and I know you use Lukaku as an example. I adore Lukaku. He is a super talented striker. He's had myriad, sort of, I guess, judgments and otherwise that come with him in his playing capacity where they're like, oh, the majority of his goals, like he needs to be served and it's like toe pokes and otherwise in and around the box. Guess what?
I'll take it.
Sometimes like I'm sorry, but like you're a striker, but like that's your job is like to score the goals irrespective. They're not always going to be beautiful. But I just think that like, his stint at Chelsea, his stint was at United where he got like abused. And that, it's not always just your on-field vibe, presence, squad gelling, and otherwise. Sometimes it's a lot of other factors off field.
Yeah, I want to bring this up because this is relevant, especially to this conversation. Luka Jovic, the Croatian player that went to Real Madrid from Eintracht Frankfurt, I believe.
Yeah.
And Fabrizio Romano just tweeted this earlier today.
I love him.
He said, quoting Luka, he said, "My experience at Real Madrid went wrong from the beginning. I left Eintracht too early. All the spotlights were on me. I was only 21. It was difficult to adapt. Injuries, COVID, and unfair pressure. It was an unhappy experience." And he told that to Repubblica. And that's a factor as well. Like the Premier League,
honest, though.
The Premier League, yes, it is challenging. It is very, very competitive, but it is also some of the most attention you're ever gonna get in your life, the most criticism, and that's part of it as well. Like the reason you get paid so much more money is to also have to deal with that constant pressure and criticism.
I mean, the reality of it is every single player that comes up and signs a massive contract like that, you're going to see, especially if they haven't really been tried and tested, whether or not, their prior performances, it was going to be like a big fish, small pond situation or vice versa. And, like the players that don't get crushed under the pressure of the larger leagues, yeah, they do turn into diamonds, and you have to have the right essentially like training staff and otherwise around them to just sort of mitigate some of the other lifestyle things. Like we've heard players from the Premier League talk about like I didn't mind the playing and whatever, but I was miserable being in England. Right. Like, so the lifestyle.
I think just regular English people probably say the same thing.
I live in Burnley. What the heck is going on here?
They like stick around. I like London as a city, but I can't spend long stretches of time there because I am a very sophisticated houseplant and I require sunlight and just vibes.
The way I sort of see it, especially with the strength and popularity of the Premier League, is that for some of these players, sometimes it's a little bit like I'm gonna that's why you go to college in Idaho or you go to it's just like you got to get away from some of the busyness of some of these big cities.
Not me personally, but you do you, Idaho.
You use it to like you grow in a different environment than what you're used to.
Exposure is good.